Ever been told to move so someone more important could have your spot? This man's response made an entire airline regret it. The first time I saw him, he didn't look like someone who was about to make headlines. He was just another passenger at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport that Wednesday afternoon, dressed in a crisp navy blazer over a plain gray t-shirt, dark jeans, and well-polished loafers. His name was Marcus Ellison, 47 years old, founder and CEO of Ellison Technologies, a company that quietly powered some of the biggest names in the corporate world. And one of those companies? A well-known national airline. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards. He wasn't flashing wealth. In fact, most people passed him by without a second glance, except for the way he carried himself. Calm, confident, like a man who had options. Marcus had been traveling for business, finalizing a multi-million-dollar deal in Houston, and now he was headed home. His ticket? First class, seat 1A. The kind of seat you don't just buy, you earn. As boarding began, he stepped onto the jet bridge, greeting the flight attendants with a polite smile. He stowed his leather briefcase, slipped into his seat, and began scrolling through his tablet. The hum of passengers boarding filled the cabin. That's when it happened. A man in a sharp suit entered the plane, trailed by two airline staff members. His hair was slicked back, his voice confident, no, demanding. The flight attendants stopped at Marcus's row. One of them cleared her throat, her eyes darting nervously. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to change seats. This gentleman here needs 1A. Marcus looked up slowly. Needs, or wants? The attendant hesitated, glancing at the suited man who was already smirking, like the matter was settled. It's a company policy matter. He's a high-status passenger. Marcus's eyebrow lifted just slightly. I see. And what am I? Beat. Silence. Passengers nearby were watching now. The suited man stepped forward, his tone dripping with condescension. Look, buddy, I'm sure your seat in business class will be just fine. This is important. Marcus's voice stayed calm. Important for you, maybe, but not for me. I'm staying here. The tension in the air was sharp enough to cut. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The flight attendant tried again, her smile stretched thin. Sir, please, we can upgrade your food and offer you a travel voucher. Marcus leaned back, eyes never leaving hers. No, this seat is mine, and unless you plan to physically remove me, I suggest you let me enjoy the flight. That's when the suited man muttered something under his breath. Something he thought Marcus wouldn't hear. Marcus heard every word. Marcus didn't move. The hum of the boarding line faded as eyes turned toward row 1A. The suited man's smirk curled into something sharper. He leaned closer, voice low, but dripping with superiority. People like you don't usually sit here. Don't make a scene. The words hit like ice. People like you. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his expression stayed calm. There was a quiet beat, then a slow, measured inhale. The flight attendant, the young woman in a neatly pressed uniform, shifted nervously between them. She kept glancing at the suited man like she'd been told this was non-negotiable. Sir, she said softly, please, we really need you to cooperate. This gentleman is a... Marcus cut her off. I don't care who he is. You've already decided I'm less important. Now you're just trying to make it sound polite. The suited man chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. This is exactly why some people shouldn't be in first class. No sense of etiquette. A sharp silence fell over the cabin. Passengers froze mid-step in the aisle. Even the flight attendant looked stunned that he'd said it out loud. Marcus didn't raise his voice, He didn't have to. I'll say this once. This seat was paid for. It's mine. If you can't respect that, maybe you should check your policies or your attitude. The flight attendant hesitated, clearly caught between instructions from higher up and the uncomfortable reality in front of her. She offered a weak smile, the kind of smile that begged for the situation to just go away. Sir, if you don't move, we may have to delay departure. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto hers, calm but unshakable. Then delay it. I'm not moving. The suited man exhaled dramatically, as if he was the victim of all this. You'll regret this, he muttered, turning away like the matter was beneath him. But Marcus only replied with one short line. No, you will. There was another pause, heavy in the air, before the flight attendant finally backed off, muttering something about speaking to the captain. And just like that, the whispers began, row by row, word spread about what had just happened. What none of them knew was that this was only the beginning. A few minutes later, the sound of firm footsteps approached. The female flight attendant returned, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her was the captain, tall, in a crisp uniform, his cap tilted just enough to cast a shadow over his eyes. Sir, the captain began, his voice firm but trying to keep a professional calm. We've had a complaint about a seating issue. I'm going to have to ask you to move. Marcus didn't flinch. There's no issue. I have a boarding pass for 1A. Paid for it myself. End of story. The captain's jaw tightened. The other passenger is... I don't care who he is, Marcus cut in, voice steady, controlled. If you wanted him here, maybe you shouldn't have sold the seat. The suited man across the aisle smirked again, leaning back like he was watching a performance he already knew the ending to. The captain exchanged a glance with the flight attendant, then back to Marcus. Sir, if you refuse to move, we may have to remove you from this flight. There was a beat of silence. And then, Marcus leaned forward slightly, his tone lowering just enough to carry an edge. Remove me, and you'll be removing your biggest corporate client from your balance sheet. The captain blinked. Excuse me? Check your files, Marcus said calmly. Bristow Systems. We handle your airline's entire IT infrastructure from your booking software to your payroll. You remove me. You remove the man whose company keeps this airline running every single day. The flight attendant's eyes widened, darting between them. The captain straightened, clearly caught off guard, but trying to hold authority. That doesn't change the seating arrangement, sir. Marcus tilted his head, a faint smile on his lips. No, but it changes what happens next if you don't fix this. Another heavy pause filled the air. The captain glanced at the suited man who now looked less confident, and then back at Marcus. The female flight attendant shifted awkwardly, clearly unsure whose side she was supposed to be on anymore. Passengers in the nearby rows were now openly watching, their faces telling the same silent question. Who exactly is this guy? Finally, the captain exhaled slowly. I'll be back. He turned sharply and walked toward the cockpit, the flight attendant following him. Marcus leaned back in his seat, calm as ever. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to argue. The wheels were already in motion. What nobody realized yet was that this wasn't just about a seat. It was about a lesson. And the lesson was coming fast. Marcus waited. The captain disappeared into the cockpit. The female flight attendant walked briskly toward the galley, whispering into her intercom. The suited man across the aisle, still smirking. He leaned toward Marcus and muttered, just loud enough to hear, "You're not going to win this." Marcus didn't even look at him. Instead, he reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out his phone. One swipe, one tap, and just like that, the call began ringing. "Ethan," Marcus said when the voice on the other end answered. "Remember that systems update I told you to hold off on?" "Yeah. Roll it out. Now." A short pause, then a chuckle. "Don't worry about the time. I'll explain later." The suited man's smirk faltered slightly, but he still tried to hold it. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket and waited. 2 minutes passed, then 3. And that's when it happened. A ding over the PA system, followed by the voice of the captain. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor technical delay. Please remain seated while we resolve the issue." Marcus crossed his legs, calm, relaxed. Another few minutes went by, and the murmurs began. Passengers glanced at each other, wondering what could be taking so long. The flight attendants looked tense. The captain reappeared, and this time there was no trace of authority in his eyes. He leaned down toward Marcus and spoke in a quieter tone. "Sir, may I have a word?" Marcus didn't move. "Say it here." The captain straightened. "There seems to be a system outage. Our booking software, check-in terminals, even the gate scanners, all down." Marcus let the silence stretch for just a moment, before finally glancing up. "That's unfortunate." The captain hesitated. "It's affecting multiple flights, including ours." The suited man's smirk was gone now, completely. The captain cleared his throat. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. If you're still willing to take your original seat, we'll be departing shortly." Marcus didn't break eye contact. "I never left it." The female flight attendant returned, looking suddenly respectful. She set down a fresh glass of sparkling water on Marcus's tray table without being asked. And just like that, the balance of power on that plane shifted. Marcus knew it. The captain knew it. And so did every passenger who'd been watching. But the best part? The real blow hadn't even landed yet. The rest of the boarding process was silent. The female flight attendant who had told Marcus to move now avoided his gaze completely, her earlier confidence replaced with quiet, mechanical motions. She poured drinks, adjusted luggage, but every so often, her eyes flicked toward him like she was wondering if he was still waiting. "Marcus?" He simply sipped his water and looked out the window, as though the view outside was infinitely more interesting than anything happening in the cabin. The suited man sat stiffly across the aisle, tapping his foot, pretending to scroll his phone. But his hand kept trembling slightly, just enough to betray the tension. The captain's voice came over the PA once again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready for departure." His tone, measured, controlled, but under it, a thin thread of unease. As the engines roared to life and the plane began taxiing, Marcus leaned back, closed his eyes, and let the hum of the aircraft fill his mind. No more words were exchanged. No more glances. The atmosphere inside that cabin was a quiet kind of pressure, the kind that makes people avoid eye contact because they know something big has shifted. The entire flight, 2 hours and 17 minutes, passed like this. No incidents, no confrontations, just a slow, heavy silence that followed Marcus like a shadow. And then, touchdown. As passengers stood to collect their bags, Marcus remained seated. The female flight attendant approached with a polite but nervous smile. "Sir, thank you for your patience today." Marcus looked at her for the first time since the incident. "Patience," he said slowly, "isn't the same as silence." She blinked, not sure how to respond. Marcus stood, straightened his blazer, and walked down the aisle taking his time, as though each step was a deliberate reminder that he was leaving on his own terms. But the real scene? It unfolded just outside the gate. Two men in airline corporate badges stood waiting, both looking very out of place among the regular airport chaos. One of them stepped forward. "Mr. Gray, we received your call." Marcus smiled faintly. "Good. You'll want to speak with your captain and your lead attendant." The corporate rep nodded grimly. "We will, immediately." Marcus gave a small wave, then turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a ripple of whispers among the staff and passengers who had witnessed everything. By the next morning, that ripple would turn into a storm. Because when Marcus Gray decided to make a point, it didn't just stay on a plane. By the time Marcus reached his hotel that night, his phone was already buzzing. It wasn't friends or family. It was reporters. Somehow word of the incident had traveled fast. Someone on that flight had posted about a CEO being told to give up his seat for a more important passenger, and tagged the airline. The post had exploded. By morning, it was everywhere. Hashtags trending, comments pouring in, thousands of strangers asking the same question. Who was this man? Marcus? He didn't speak to the press. He didn't post a single word. He let the story breathe on its own, because sometimes silence makes more noise than shouting. Meanwhile, inside the airline's headquarters, panic had taken over. Corporate emails flew back and forth. Meetings were called before sunrise. Someone pulled Marcus's name from the passenger manifest. And then everything stopped. Marcus Gray, founder and CEO of Greystone Technologies, one of the airline's largest technology partners. And not just that his company handled the airline's entire scheduling and booking platform. Without him, they couldn't run a single flight. At 9:43 a.m., the CEO of the airline himself picked up the phone. "Marcus, I owe you an apology." His voice was careful, almost rehearsed. Marcus let the pause stretch before answering. "You owe your staff training, you owe your passengers respect, and you owe yourself the courage to fix what's broken." The airline CEO tried again. "I want to make this right." Marcus cut in, calm but razor sharp. "Then start by removing the captain and the lead attendant today." There was silence on the other end. The kind of silence that comes when someone realizes they're out of moves. By noon, both were gone. The internal memo called it a restructuring. But Marcus knew, and so did every employee who had been on that flight, what had really happened. That evening, the airline's official account posted a carefully worded statement about commitment to equality and zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior. The internet ate it up. Some praised them for acting quickly. Others called it corporate damage control. Marcus? He wasn't interested in their PR. He'd made his point. And more importantly, he'd done it without shouting, without threats, without spectacle. He'd simply reminded them that power isn't about who sits in first class. It's about who can change the rules for everyone. And that, Marcus Gray had done.